My name is James, and I am a designer and an actor and performer at the time. As a writer, I obviously think about a lot about projects that I'm gonna want to work on, and I think a lot about that. I do a lot of movement-based stuff, and I spend a lot of time thinking about visualizing particular movements and things I'm going to do when I get to practice and what I'm going to do with my time when I do that. I would say I am a very routine driven person who lives a very non routine life. I tend to, for instance, I try and get up, it's gone all out the window over the winter period, but I try and get up at the same time every day. I do yoga every morning. I like to have, because I have to realise to do what I do, I have to have a certain amount of practice and a certain routine. I don't like to be told, like, I didn't enjoy really doing office jobs a lot of the time because I don't like that kind of very structured routine. I like to make my own routines, but I find some kind of routine and some kind of focus point throughout my day and knowing what I'm going to be doing helps to motivate me to do it. Whereas if I just live and have days where it's just, I like a few days of chaos, but when it gets to too many days of chaos without any kind of structuring point, any kind of point where I'm like, oh yeah, that's something I can hang on to, it's going to happen. If it's just completely out of my control all the time, I don't really like that. So I never really understand, like, I always think you have to have some reason to get out of bed. It used to be because I really like coffee, but now doing the yoga in the morning I really like as well. But I still really like coffee, and you have to have a reason, like, you're laughing. You have to have like, why do people get out of bed? Why do people do things? You could just literally, people like talk about it like, oh yeah, I just want to stay in bed. And so I was like, of course you do. Who doesn't want to just stay in bed all day? Like, literally, I used to think I'd end up as an alcoholic because the law of just kind of just drinking all the time, being drunk, and just like not getting out of bed is overwhelming a lot of the time. But you have to give yourself a routine and a purpose. When I was younger, when I kind of left school, like not really thinking about all that stuff, but I think going through like my 20s, my mindset was very much always, I think I just lived quite a sort of normal life. I'd work as a designer, I had quite a creative job. I was always doing lots of exercise. I played a lot of football. At one point I always had a really full life. So I'd have like, I used to do boxing on a Monday, capoeira on a Tuesday, football on a Wednesday, boxing on a Thursday, or capoeira depending, drinking on a Friday, drinking on a Saturday, wake up and play football on a Sunday. There was a lot of drinking, but I had like this. But I was very kind of like, like I looked forward to. I think that's kind of what people do, isn't it? You go to work, you work, and then you get to Friday or Thursday, depending on what kind of person you are, and you go out and you get drunk, and then like Friday comes along, and then you just get drunk all weekend, and then you carry on. And I think my mindset kind of changed when I realised that a lot of that I was doing maybe because I didn't particularly like myself. So a lot of when I was drinking, I noticed I was just getting drunk for the sake of it, and then I was like, why am I doing this to myself? I'm just getting really drunk. And like, it started off as something that I enjoyed, and then became something that I realised that wasn't particularly something I needed in my life. So I still, I'm not like, I still drink occasionally, but I don't really get drunk particularly anymore. But I think that kind of, when you start making those kind of changes in your life, you realise like, my mindset changed to being like, well, what do I actually enjoy in my life? And picking out the things that I enjoy. Like I say, that's what we talk about with the routine thing. Once you realise that you enjoy something, then why wouldn't you try and build that into your life? I think you write what is in your head and who you kind of are. I think what kind of shaped you I always remember being a funny person. I don't mean that in a big-headed kind of way. I always remember just being hilarious. But I think like kind of when you're younger, some obviously things shape you, but I've always just had a good kind of sense of humour, and I've always been a person who enjoys making people laugh. I think I find it a weird conflict because I'm, in some respects, quite a serious person, and I've always viewed things with a sense of humour. I don't think I can kind of help it, and I don't think I can take myself too seriously or anything too seriously. I view a lot of things as just ridiculous, and even things that really interest me, like design is really interesting, and it's not necessarily comedic in its form and its importance, but I think I just always look for the humour in things. I don't even look for the humour in things, I just end up finding it. I don't really know why that's for me, but it is. I think all human beings must get frustrated with each other at some point when you kind of think, like, going through the experiences I've gone through, and you kind of talk to people about it, and you go, yeah, there you go, that must help. And then you see them, and they still do things, and you're like, but surely if you just did this... But I think trying to understand how people think is really difficult sometimes, and you can kind of think, I read quite a lot about I read a lot about architecture and design, and we'll start from that point of view, because when you start thinking about architecture and design and engineering, everything is very kind of simple and structured, and it's in its place, and everything works like it does for a reason. And if you try and sort of take the randomness, like I have a lot of random thoughts in my brain, but if you kind of take your life and say, okay, if I can engineer and design this to work as almost like a system, then you should be able to deal with things. And that works for a lot of like how you approach things yourself, but then other people are such a random thing in there, and other people's thoughts and the way they work are so random. And like, I try not to be frustrated by people. You have to realize that everyone has completely different ways of thinking about things, and knowing people and knowing how much some people kind of, that I know, struggle with overthinking or struggle with kind of things that might seem obvious and simple to you, but then suddenly to someone else, you realize that the way they think about it and the way they condense that information makes it into something like completely different. And I think that kind of, I think I find myself as well, because I think this maybe comes from the acting side. I'm quite an empathetic kind of person, which I think you kind of have to be an actor as well. You always kind of pick up on other people's kind of emotions and feelings and a little bit how they're working, I guess, and then that kind of throws you sometimes out of like, I don't think you can engineer your life, is my point. I think you can try and think like that, and it's healthy for me, I think, to try and think like that. I think it's a good approach to things, but I think you will always have things that kind of twist that around and move that, and people are all kind of like little, everything can be just spinning along, like, just vibrating like this and everything's fine, and then you'll get someone who's just this whirlwind that just destroys or makes everything better, like it just is the way it is. People's thought patterns are all a little bit different, and I think you can never kind of design something to accept or make that work perfectly, but you have to just adapt yourself to those. And realizing as well when you're picking up on things that maybe aren't how you want to be, because it's easy to get sucked into it and be like, now I'm annoyed at things and now everything's wrong, and then you go, oh, but I'm just picking up on something from someone else's, and I should think about this in the way I want to. But sometimes you just get so far down the line in this kind of direction you've gone in that it takes a while to track back and go, oh yeah, what am I doing? Like, as from a writing point of view, when I come up with a new sort of idea for a script, I absolutely obsess over it. I obsess over quite a few things. I think like I used to collect things when I was younger. A lot of people collect things, and it's like that's just a form of some kind of obsession. And then I realised that I was moving house all the time, and I don't wanted to collect things anymore because it just means moving a lot of boxes, and I didn't want to do that. So, but I think people all kind of obsess over things. I think, but they're just different things, and you don't know what people are thinking about. I think maybe some people do think a little bit more than others, but I think everyone has that internal narrative. Everyone has an internal narrative that is saying something to them. Either that internal narrative, like for some people that becomes, kind of can be very depressing to have an internal narrative that's telling you you're rubbish all the time or things like that, or you can have a very positive internal narrative. But I think all people think a lot, and all people probably overthink. I just think it's the people who sort of say, oh, I'm overthinking things or I'm overdoing things, are probably just not able to find clarity in the overthinking.